this episode, we're going to take privacy strategy, which can feel like a set of big ideas, and turn it into a program charter that people can actually use to make consistent decisions. A lot of beginners think a charter is just a formal document you create because someone expects it, but a privacy charter is more like the operating agreement for the privacy program. The Certified Information Privacy Manager, CIPM, exam cares about charters because strategy without a charter often stays stuck in meetings, while operations keeps moving and creates risk in the background. A strong charter makes privacy real by defining scope, authority, responsibilities, and how success will be measured, so the program stops relying on personalities and starts relying on structure. You are going to learn what a privacy program charter is, why it matters, and how to translate goals into actions, ownership, and metrics that survive day-to-day pressure. By the end, you should be able to recognize whether a charter is actionable and measurable, or whether it is just well-written words with no power. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A privacy program charter is a document, but it is more importantly a commitment that connects leadership intent to organizational behavior. It states what the privacy program is responsible for, what it is not responsible for, and where the program has the authority to require action. This matters because privacy work crosses departments, and without a written agreement, teams will interpret privacy differently and prioritize it differently. The charter is also the bridge between strategy and governance, because it converts broad priorities into specific decision rights, escalation paths, and responsibilities that can be followed repeatedly. If strategy says trust and transparency matter, the charter defines who owns transparency decisions, how notices are maintained, and what processes ensure commitments match practice. If strategy says the organization will be risk-aware, the charter defines how risk assessments are triggered, who approves residual risk, and how risk treatment decisions are documented. The exam often tests whether you understand that a charter is the starting point for accountability, because it makes privacy expectations explicit and harder to ignore. One reason charters fail is that people confuse a charter with a policy, and that confusion leads to documents that are either too vague or too detailed to be useful. A policy is a rule that says what must be true, like requirements for handling personal information or restrictions on data sharing. A charter, by contrast, describes the program itself, its mandate, its structure, and its measurement. It tells the organization who runs privacy, how privacy decisions are made, and how privacy will be integrated into business processes. A charter should not try to list every operational procedure, because procedures change and belong in separate operational documentation. Instead, it should define the program capabilities that must exist, such as inventories, training, assessments, rights request handling, incident coordination, and vendor oversight, and it should define who owns those capabilities. When a charter turns into a huge list of rules, it becomes hard to maintain and easy to ignore. The more useful approach is to keep the charter focused on scope, authority, and accountability, and then let policies and procedures do the detailed work. To translate strategy into a charter, you need to start with scope, because scope answers what the program covers and prevents endless debates later. Scope includes what kinds of data are in focus, such as personally identifiable information, what kinds of processing activities are included, and what parts of the organization must follow the program requirements. It also includes whether the charter covers employees, customers, partners, and other groups whose data is processed, because a privacy program that covers only one population is often incomplete. Scope should also address geography and business units at a high level, especially if the organization operates across multiple regions, because different obligations can affect program requirements. A beginner-friendly way to think about scope is that it defines the boundary of responsibility, so teams know when to involve privacy and when a topic belongs elsewhere. When scope is unclear, privacy gets pulled into everything, which creates burnout and bottlenecks, or privacy gets pulled into nothing, which creates uncontrolled risk. The charter makes scope explicit so the program can prioritize effectively and operate consistently. Authority is the next translation step, and it is the part that makes a charter actionable rather than ceremonial. Authority means the privacy program has defined decision rights, such as the ability to require reviews for certain processing, enforce baseline standards, and stop or escalate high-risk activities when necessary. Authority does not mean privacy controls every decision, because that would be unrealistic and would create constant conflict, but it does mean privacy has a binding role at defined checkpoints. Authority also includes access to information, because a program cannot manage what it cannot see, so the charter should support visibility into data flows, vendor relationships, and changes in processing. A common misunderstanding is thinking authority comes from expertise alone, but expertise without formal authority leads to advice that can be ignored when schedules get tight. The charter should clarify how authority is granted, such as through executive sponsorship, governance committees, or defined approval workflows, so teams understand that privacy requirements are part of normal operations. On the exam, weak authority often shows up as recurring issues and late engagement, and a stronger charter is a common solution. Responsibilities and roles turn authority into a functioning system, because authority without defined ownership creates confusion about who does the work. The charter should define the privacy program's responsibilities, such as developing and maintaining privacy policies, coordinating training, managing assessments, supporting rights request processes, and collaborating on incident evaluation. It should also define what responsibilities sit with business units, like maintaining accurate data inventories for their systems, following procedures, and engaging privacy early in new initiatives. Roles like Chief Privacy Officer, CPO, and Data Protection Officer, DPO, may be mentioned depending on context, and the important point is that leadership roles must be tied to specific program accountabilities, not just titles. The charter should also describe how privacy partners with legal, security, procurement, and product teams, because privacy outcomes depend on those interfaces. When responsibilities are clearly defined, the program becomes scalable because work is distributed while accountability remains clear. The exam often tests this by presenting scenarios where privacy work falls through gaps, and the right answer usually involves clarifying responsibilities and creating repeatable coordination points. A charter becomes measurable when it translates responsibilities into outcomes and indicators that can be tracked over time, because measurement is what turns a program into a managed system. Strategy might say the organization values transparency, but a measurable charter defines how transparency will be monitored, such as keeping notices current, tracking changes in processing, and measuring customer confusion through complaint trends. Strategy might say the organization values risk management, but a measurable charter defines how risk work will be performed and tracked, such as the coverage of privacy assessments and the timeliness of mitigations. Key Performance Indicator, KPI, and Key Risk Indicator, KRI, are common measurement ideas, and the point is that KPI values show how program activities are performing, while KRI values signal increasing risk or control weakness. A measurable charter does not require dozens of metrics, because too many metrics create noise and distract attention. Instead, it selects a small set of indicators that match the program's goals and that leadership will actually review and act on. The exam tends to reward practical measurement that drives decisions, because that is what makes privacy programs improve over time. To keep measurement realistic, the charter should connect metrics to governance review and accountability, because metrics without review are just numbers. The charter should define who reviews program metrics, how often reviews occur, and what actions follow from poor performance. For example, if training completion rates drop, the charter should support corrective actions such as targeted training, manager escalation, or changes to onboarding processes. If rights request response timelines slip, the charter should trigger process review, staffing adjustments, or improvements in data retrieval capabilities. If assessment coverage declines for new projects, the charter should reinforce intake processes and escalation paths so teams cannot quietly bypass reviews. This is how measurement becomes part of the system rather than a reporting exercise. A beginner mistake is to treat metrics as a way to prove the program is busy, but mature programs use metrics to prove the program is effective and to reveal where it is not. The charter should also define how metrics will be gathered, at least at a high level, so measurement is feasible and repeatable. When you see exam scenarios about stagnant programs, weak accountability, or recurring issues, strengthening metric governance is often a key part of the solution. Another important part of making a charter actionable is defining program capabilities, because capabilities are the repeatable functions the program must perform regardless of specific tools or organizational changes. Common capabilities include maintaining a data inventory, managing policies and standards, coordinating privacy assessments, handling rights requests, overseeing vendors, supporting incident coordination, and delivering training and awareness. A charter should clarify which capabilities are owned by the privacy function and which are shared, because shared ownership without clarity often becomes no ownership. It should also describe how capabilities connect to the privacy life cycle. So strategy drives the charter, governance makes the charter enforceable, and operations deliver the capabilities consistently. This connection matters because the charter is not a static artifact. It is the foundation for how the program runs as the organization changes. If the business adds a new product line, the charter should still apply because it defines how new processing is reviewed and governed. If the organization grows, the charter should still apply because it defines how responsibilities can be distributed while maintaining oversight. The exam often rewards thinking in terms of durable capabilities because that is what program management is. A charter also needs to address how exceptions are handled, because real organizations cannot operate with zero exceptions, and unmanaged exceptions are a major source of risk. Exceptions occur when a team wants to deviate from a policy or standard, such as collecting additional data, retaining data longer, or using data for a new purpose without normal controls. An actionable charter defines the exception process, including who can request an exception, who can approve it, what documentation is required, and how exceptions are tracked and reviewed over time. This is important because exceptions are where intent and reality collide, and without a process, exceptions become informal workarounds that accumulate quietly. The charter should also tie exceptions to risk evaluation, so higher-risk exceptions require stronger approvals and more frequent review. This is where risk appetite becomes operational, because the organization's tolerance for risk is expressed through what exceptions are allowed and under what conditions. On the exam, scenarios about repeated bypassing or inconsistent practices often point to missing exception governance, and a stronger charter is a direct way to stabilize the program. The charter should also define how privacy is integrated into business workflows, because integration is what reduces friction and prevents late surprises. Integration can include requiring privacy involvement at defined points in product planning, vendor onboarding, marketing campaign design, and changes to data processing. A charter that only describes privacy responsibilities without describing integration points can lead teams to treat privacy as optional or last minute, which increases rework and resentment. The program manager's goal is to make privacy predictable, so teams know when to engage and what information they need to provide. Integration also supports scalability, because a central privacy team cannot discover every initiative on its own. The organization needs a mechanism that brings initiatives to privacy early. A good charter supports risk-based triage, meaning not every project needs the same level of review, but higher impact processing triggers deeper assessment. Privacy Impact Assessment, PIA, and Data Protection Impact Assessment, DPIA, are common names for structured privacy assessments, and the charter should define when such assessments are expected and who owns them. The exam often favors early integration and risk-based triage because they are realistic controls that improve both privacy outcomes and business speed. Because privacy programs depend on cross-functional cooperation, an actionable charter should also define the program's key partnerships and how coordination will work in practice. Coordination with legal matters because legal interprets obligations and supports defensibility, while the privacy program operationalizes those obligations into policies, procedures, and training. Coordination with security matters because privacy outcomes depend on security safeguards, monitoring, and incident response, even though privacy also involves purpose and fairness. Coordination with procurement matters because vendor relationships are a major privacy risk pathway, and contracts and oversight must align with program expectations. Coordination with product and data teams matters because new data uses often begin in design decisions, and privacy must be considered early to avoid rework and hidden risk. The charter should identify these partnerships and clarify who does what at a high level, so coordination becomes routine rather than personal. When partnerships are vague, privacy becomes dependent on informal relationships, which is fragile under staffing changes and organizational stress. The exam tends to reward defined interfaces because they make programs durable and measurable. It is also important for the charter to include a practical approach to resourcing, because a privacy program cannot deliver its responsibilities without time, staffing, and support. A charter does not need to list every budget line, but it should clarify that the program has access to resources appropriate to its scope and risk profile. It should also define how resource needs will be identified, such as through metrics, risk assessments, incident trends, and changes in business activity. For example, if the organization expands into new regions, the charter should support expanding privacy capacity because obligations and complexity increase. If rights requests grow, the charter should support process improvements and staffing adjustments because timeliness and consistency are part of trust. Resourcing also includes training and tools that support data inventories and workflow tracking, even if the charter stays tool neutral. Beginners sometimes assume charters are purely administrative, but the charter's job is to make the program possible, and that includes ensuring leadership understands what the program requires to function. On the exam, when you see a privacy program failing due to overload, a charter-backed resourcing model is often an appropriate remedy. A measurable charter should include a cadence of review and improvement because programs must evolve as data use, technology, and expectations change. The charter should define how often the program reviews its policies, procedures, and metrics, and how it incorporates lessons learned from incidents, audits, and stakeholder feedback. This review cadence turns privacy into a continuous improvement cycle rather than a one-time compliance sprint. It also supports maturity growth, because early programs often focus on building baseline controls, while later programs focus on integration, automation, and more refined measurement. A charter that includes periodic review encourages proactive adjustments, such as updating training when new risks emerge or revising intake processes when teams bypass them. This is also where documentation and evidence matter, because the program needs to demonstrate that it is actively managed, not merely declared. The exam often emphasizes that privacy programs should be living systems, and the charter is the document that formally commits the organization to keeping the system alive. When you see scenario answers that include review and improvement mechanisms, they often reflect the charter's purpose. As you translate strategy into a charter, it helps to think of the charter as answering a set of practical questions in a way that people can remember and apply. What is the privacy program responsible for, and what does it explicitly not own? Who leads the program, and what authority does that leadership have at key decision points? How are responsibilities distributed across business units? And how is accountability tracked? What program capabilities must exist so privacy can be managed consistently across the data lifecycle? How will the organization measure success, and who reviews metrics and acts on them? When are assessments required? How are exceptions handled? And how is privacy integrated into daily workflows so teams engage early? These questions do not need to appear as a checklist in the charter to be useful, but they should be answered clearly within the charter's narrative. The reason this matters for exam performance is that many scenario questions are really asking which of these elements is missing. If you understand what a strong charter contains, you can diagnose gaps quickly and choose the best program response. As we close, remember that a privacy program charter is the practical translation of privacy strategy into scope, authority, responsibilities, and measurement that an organization can actually execute. Strategy provides direction, but the charter makes that direction operational by defining who owns what, who can decide, and how progress is tracked and improved. A charter is actionable when it grants clear decision rights, defines integration points into real workflows, and establishes processes for assessments and exceptions that reflect risk appetite. A charter is measurable when it selects meaningful KPI and KRI indicators, defines review cadences, and connects metrics to accountability and corrective action. The CIPM exam is not asking you to love documents. It is asking you to understand how programs become real and durable. When you can explain how a charter stabilizes the privacy life cycle and reduces reliance on informal habits, you are demonstrating program manager thinking. The goal is durable trust supported by a system, and the charter is one of the most important system-building tools you have.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.